Only in America.
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 This week, a closer look at the lives of the workers putting food on our tables.
You know, if they're not here to provide this food for us, the farmers now are facing major shortages. Crops are often being plowed under because there's nobody to harvest them. And so if we don't have those fruit and vegetables, we'll be back to victory gardens.
From the National Immigration Forum, I'm Ali Nirani, and this is Only in America. Since the First World War, the U.S. has used temporary guest worker programs to address labor shortages in the agriculture industry. And these jobs have overwhelmingly been filled by immigrants. The Bracero program, for example, started in the 1940s to alleviate wartime farm worker shortages. The program brought Mexican workers to American fields where they filled critical jobs and put food on American tables. But the Bracero program fell short in many ways. First of all, the program failed to account for the long-term needs of the agricultural industry. And second, since the program did not treat farm workers as human beings who start families and, plant roots in their communities, there was no way for them to remain in the country and pursue permanent legal status, much less citizenship. The Immigration and Naturalization Service removed 1.1 million Mexicans, including U.S.-born and thus U.S. citizen children of braceros, in June 1954. In order to address the first issue, the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952 created the H-2A temporary work visa that is still used today by seasonal growers to fill their labor needs. However, this legal pathway for farm workers remains complicated and expensive, failing to meet our basic agriculture workforce needs. As a result, H-2A workers still make up a small percentage of field workers. The fact is that more than half of those working in the agriculture industry are undocumented, which means undocumented workers are doing critical jobs, but they're being driven into the shadows, unable to fully participate in a society that relies on them for every meal. Now more than ever, it's clear that our immigration system is standing in the way of a safe, sustainable food supply, which is all the more apparent as concerns about the COVID-19 pandemic intensify. How can we expect workers to feel safe seeking medical advice when our immigration policies leave the threat of deportation looming over them? How can we expect people to do their jobs when they fear that helping a sick family member could ultimately lead to their separation? Ensuring access to legal status for farm workers is a food security issue and a human rights issue. Solutions for these workers who are putting food on our table ultimately are solutions for all of us.
Support for the National Immigration Forum comes from the Carnegie Corporation of New York, supporting innovations in education, democratic engagement, and strengthening international peace and security. And from Humanity United. When humanity is united, we can bring a powerful force for human dignity.
Judy Fisk Lucas has dedicated her career to advocating for field workers. Judy is the founder and president of Friends of Fieldworkers, a nonprofit providing support to immigrant field workers in Ventura County, California, a major agricultural region in the country. Judy is passionate about helping the people in her community who need it most, serving field workers and their families by connecting them to medical, dental, and educational services. She recently published a book called Friends of Fieldworkers, sharing the stories of the families she works with and the realities they face. I spoke with Judy and her husband Ted, who is also active in Friends of Fieldworkers. We chatted about the impact of their work, the responses to her book, and the value of immigrant workers to Ventura County and beyond. Judy and Ted, thank you so much for joining. This is going to be so much fun talking, so thank you.
Thank
It's
you.
a pleasure to be here.
So before we talk a little bit about the book and all the work that you do, tell me a little bit about yourselves. How do you find yourself where you are today?
I grew up in Hawaii. My dad was a pastor and had 7 churches on one island. And the way that he relaxed and related to his eldest daughter, that would be me, was in the garden. And most of my friends in Kona were farmers, coffee farmers. So I guess I was introduced to field workers from the time I was just, a little kid, 5 years old. And then after we came to California, I became involved with field workers in Salinas. It was my very first teaching job. I taught migrant children. And I just fell in love with that group of people. I just loved it. We had foster children. I spent my weekends helping paint their houses out at their camps and just getting to know them. And that's how it started, actually.
And Ted, and yourself?
I'm probably just the opposite. I had no familiarity with farm workers growing up. I grew up in San Diego, California, and was a child of a Navy officer, so we traveled around the country quite a bit. Most of my life has been in higher education, where I've been an administrator and a professor of music. And I met Judy at San Jose State University in 1997, I think, and we got married in 99. And it was Judy's commitment to helping the underprivileged that really got me interested in working with farm workers.
So tell me a little bit about Friends of Fieldworkers.
Well, in the beginning, in 2013, we met field worker families after a fire gutted their apartments. We worked with the Red Cross and MyCop, which is an organization called Mixteco Indigenous Community Organizing Project. Mm-hmm. And they work with people from Oaxaca primarily, but other pueblos in Mexico. And we have about 20 or 30,000 Mixtecos here in our county. So anyway, we worked with them to find out what the specific needs were after the fire. And that would be clothes, shoes, food, water, linens, furniture, and just emotional support. Now, most of our contacts come by referral through clinics and churches or other field workers themselves.
Yeah, we one thing that makes us different from many nonprofits, if not most, is that the name of our organization really tells you a lot about what we are committed to do, and that is to become friends of the field workers. We don't just sit in an office and send out checks. I mean, we get to know the families, we visit them, we continue to follow their progress. And in fact, it has turned out that some of the families indeed have turned out to be our best friends.
So these days, or since the fire, and as you've gotten to know the community and as you've become friends with members of the farm worker community, what are some of the consistent challenges that field workers are facing these days?
Well, there are many, many challenges. There are physical challenges. You're bending over all day, 8 hours a day is extremely painful. And they have to work in extreme weather conditions. It can be very cold in the morning here in Ventura County and very hot in the afternoon. They only get two breaks a day, 1 half-hour lunch break and then a 15 to 20-minute break in the afternoon. And, well, another challenge is that, just the fact of life, there are very few porta potties, and oftentimes, they're far away across the other side of the field. So it turns out that they might actually have to spend their breaks, just standing in line.
Those who work in the strawberries bend over all day or kneel. So they have constant knee and back pain, many of them. The raspberry workers' hands get scratched and poked by thorns. But if they wear gloves, that slows them down. And since they're paid by the number of boxes of fruit they pick, they can be seen running in the fields all the time. They're just running. And in rainy weather, they work in the mud. During the recent fires, they worked in the smoke, often without masks. They have sprained ankles, respiratory problems, skin rashes. But you know what? By far the worst physical danger is their exposure to pesticides. And in our work, I see many babies and children with cancer, cleft palates, crippling diseases, mental and physical disabilities.
How do you meet the families? And then, whether it's the physical ailment or housing, what does it look like as you are helping families?
Well, my favorite two words are reciprocity and recognition. I have them up on my wall. We want them to know that we see them, we care, we value them. And so the first and most important thing we do to help them is to meet them where they are, and that is in their homes. Alma Ramirez is one of our board members. She's Mexican American. She speaks Spanish and exudes empathy. So I'll hear about somebody from a clinic or a church or something, and I'll call her and she'll make the initial call to the family by phone. And she'll get a list of their names, ages, specific needs. So, like, for example, last week, a family needed a crib mattress, some school clothes, and shoes for their little 4.5-year-old preschooler. So I went to their home that day, got more details, and I delivered the items by 7 that evening. I always take books and small toys for the children, even when they're just infants. And this week, 2 of our families expressed fear about the shortage of water and toilet paper in the stores, because even in Costco, those were flying off the shelves and those items weren't available. So I found toilet paper at a local pharmacy. Although I usually take stuff out of our own cupboards. And I took them a Brita faucet filter system. You know what those are. And we installed it together. So that's kind of how we start with families. And then some we've been with for 7 years since the fire, maybe a dozen families out of the 25 we started with. But then we've added new families as well. Then some people just kind of drop off. It's as though they want to be independent of any extra help. And that's part of our goal, is that, they'll be completely independent.
Yeah, and in recent years, I think within the last 2 or 3 years, most of our clients have come from referrals from clinics and hospitals and churches. So that's how that works.
And do you feel like, the interest or the need of the community has increased over the last few years, say, compared to the first few years of when you were helping?
It seems to be about the same. I mean, it's by that I mean there's no way we could help everybody. It's just a huge mountain to climb over, and we'll never do it. And that's the most frustrating thing, is there is so much need out there, and so many poor workers who are in need of basic things like food, shelter, clothing, and things like diapers. There's no way we could meet them all. So it's really hard to judge whether there's more need or less over the last few years. Mm-hmm. It's just always great.
So, Judy, you wrote this amazing book, Friends of Fieldworkers, True Personal Stories of Triumphs, Tears, and Invisibility. What led you to kind of set aside the time and put pen to paper?
I think what it was is that I realized that we're not young spring chickens anymore, and that we weren't always going to be able to do this work. We'll do it as long as we possibly can. But I wanted to write down some of the things that we'd learned, so that if other people will pick up the mantle and, get out there and do this wonderful and necessary work, that they wouldn't have to start from scratch. I'm sure there are other people out there, although we haven't found many. No. But, I'm always looking for best practices, and it's hard to find people that do this kind of work. So that's how I got started. And it took me about 2 months to write it, and then about 3 months to go through the getting permissions from everybody that, whose pictures we took and stories we told, even though we don't use any real names in the book of our field workers, that is. It took about 3 months to get that approved through our publishing company, and that's Ex Libris. So we self-published. And and now I have just submitted the Spanish version and the full color art version last week. So that should be coming out hopefully fairly soon.
Hope so.
Yeah. And as you were writing it, what surprised you?
Well, what kind of surprised me was the way that we wrapped the story and the experiences around Maslow's pyramid of basic needs. And I have always loved Maslow. Ever since I started teaching, and I was in teaching for about 20 years off and on, I was so impressed with the fact that, if people don't have their basic needs of water, food, sleep, a roof over their heads, they're not going to be able to go up to the next level, which is security. And so many of our people are stuck on the first step of the pyramid. But what I noticed was that we had examples of things that we're doing with people at all levels of the pyramid, all the way up to self-actualization. And that was my biggest surprise.
And then how, as people have read the book, what's the reception been?
That's a great question. I sent out 230 of them as thank yous to our donors and to people like you who I thought might be interested. And I'm so glad you are. And the most exciting thing, though, is about 5 responses from you, from
Justice Sotomayor.
Yeah.
She wrote and said, "Thank you for the book."
Really?
Yeah.
Yes.
It was amazing. Yeah.
And then also, about the Chamaco study, that 20-year longitudinal study that started in 1999. And it was the Natividad Medical Center, the Salinas Valley Clinic, and Berkeley. And they've been studying over 800 children since birth and followed more of them since then. And the purpose of it is to study the effect of environmental health exposures during pregnancy and childhood on children and their families. So I found a couple of people involved in that study.
As a result of sending out these books.
Yeah. Dr. Caroline Kennedy's the director of a medical center up in Salinas, and she's very interested in our work. And then also...
We also sent one to Pope Francis. But
Pope Francis. I'm still waiting for him to call me in the middle of the night.
What a slacker.
Yeah, but the response in general to your question is that it's been even though it's only 10%, all of the responses have been very positive.
As people are reading the book and learning more about the organization, what do you want them to take away? What do you want them to do differently?
Well, first of all, can I just say that I like to bring up the issue that comes up frequently for us of immigrant field workers taking jobs from Americans.
Please, yeah.
All right. With all the dangers and hazards in the fields, the low pay, the few safety nets after illness and injury, their irregular hours, sexual harassment, social isolation, these jobs are actually not in high demand for American citizens. And in fact, in our present political climate, many of our field workers choose to go home to Mexico where they're pretty sure they will not earn a living wage to avoid the risks of being separated from their children and other ICE afflictions. So I want people to know that. And, if they're not here to provide this food for us, the farmers now are facing major shortages. Crops are often being plowed under because there's nobody to harvest them. And so if we don't have those fruit and vegetables, we'll be back to victory gardens.
So then, as you're doing this work on a day-to-day basis, in your mind, do you go back to being a child in Hawaii and getting to know farm workers for the first time? Could you ever imagine yourself doing what you're doing today?
No, I never imagined it. But my father, as a pastor, was very much involved with people where they lived, where they were. He was there for births, for deaths, for funerals, for weddings, for the most important crises in people's lives. And I think that Dad modeled to me that. So I've been at a delivery with one of my dear friends. I was at a death last month with one of our people. He was 38 years old, worked in the fields for 25 years since he was 13, and he died of a very rare cancer, which in my mind is undoubtedly related to his work.
Yeah, we're dealing with the pesticides.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So would you like to hear about one project that I'm really excited about?
Please.
Jenny's niece
Yeah.
Juno is in 5th grade. They live in Ahwatukee, Arizona.
Near Phoenix, yeah.
And I really wanted my grandkids to get to know what we do because, it's the children that we can have the most impact with, changing their views, their attitudes, their hearts towards people, other people, and developing empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, I called her teacher, whose name happens to be Miss Oaxaca, of all things. And because most of our people are from Oaxaca, Mexico. And I asked her if she'd be willing to have her kids read the book. And she said, sure. So about 9 or 10 kids signed up for the book club, they call it. And they're reading the book. And then they email me questions. And we've started a little pen pal project, which is coming along very, very slowly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because of, many of the kids have never received a letter in the mail ever in their lives,
Mm-hmm.
let alone their parents often haven't. So they don't know how to go about writing.
Our local kids.
Yeah, our local kids here.
Mm-hmm.
So the children in Arizona are writing these very long pen pal letters, and I'm doing it with our kids here through dictation. And
On the phone.
and then they draw pictures and stuff. So it's going slowly, but some of the kids have even talked on the phone. So I think that's a good thing.
And what are those conversations like?
Oh, it's wonderful. What they had for lunch, what their favorite singing groups are.
Do they have any pets?
Do they have pets?
Mm-hmm.
It just really kind of normal conversations. But their lives are so different. So different. So we're going to go there in a week and a half, and I'm going to get to see the kids, be with them in their class, and talk to them about, I'm hoping that the concept of activism comes up. But if it doesn't, we'll squeeze it in some way.
I have a funny feeling you will.
She might, yeah.
And you'll love this. My first husband's second wife, she and I are best buddies. Her name is Sylvia. She had a birthday fundraiser on Facebook for Friends of Fieldworkers.
Really?
And my son, Tim, and my husband, Ted, and our daughter in Texas, they all have had birthday fundraisers for Friends of Fieldworkers. And it's slow, but the people are finding out.
Yes.
You had mentioned earlier recognition and reciprocity. How do you live out those words in what you do? And then how do you feel like those two words, recognition and reciprocity, take hold in the community of work that you're building?
Oh, I love that question. That's my favorite one yet. From the very beginning, when I meet a child, I ask what they're interested in. They'll tell me their favorite, Boxcar Children book or whatever. And the next time I go to visit them, I try to bring them a copy of, a book or two or more that have to do with that topic. And that goes on every time we visit. I really, really try to meet them right where they are. Last week and 3 weeks before that, I went with one lady who's having problems with her eyes, and it's pretty serious. So she asked if I would go with her. So I've been to the ER with her, to, different doctors. And last week, I'm trying to find it here, but she wrote me this most precious note. And since she speaks Mixteco first and Spanish second, and I don't speak either of those, we have to use our translator on the phone a lot. But she wrote me this wonderful note about, thank you for being with me, for coming when I'm scared. You're right here by my side, walking me through it. And the children write thank you notes sometimes, but mainly it's just the joy that I get when I see the children, when I walk up to the door and I hear them say, "It's Judy, it's Judy, it's Judy." Libros and libros.
Oh, yeah. Or they call you Grandma Judy. Here comes Grandma Judy.
Yeah, that's it. I love that.
It really comes down to being a friend. And it could be as simple as, being at an eye exam to something more complicated and intense, like trying to find a service or a program or clothing. That's what friends do.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes, it's exactly. And it's very fulfilling. Ted and I are in our 70s, and we want to be living until we die. And this is the best way to do it, because every morning we get up and think, who's going to call us today? What can we deliver today? Who can we go visit today?
Who can we help today?
Yeah.
What do you think your father would say, Judy, about this work?
Oh, he's saying, that's my girl. That's my son-in-law.
Juju.
Yeah.
Yeah. He would be very, very pleased.
Well, I have one last question for you, and this is a question that I ask everybody. And that's just to finish this sentence of only in America, ... So either one of you can go first. I'll let you duke it out or flip a coin.
How much money actually goes out of our county each year? How much money do we raise in crops?
Oh, geez. 2 or 3 billion. It's amazing. Yeah.
It's a huge amount of money that we make off the backs of our field workers in our county. And yet we treat them so poorly. The average annual income is $26,000, and the annual amount of rent they pay is $25,000. And that's with maybe 2 or 3 families living in one apartment or one garage. Only in America would we need people so badly and get so much income through their work and treat them so poorly.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Ted. I really, really appreciate the time. And more than that, I am so grateful for everything that you're doing through Friends of Fieldworkers. Judy and Ted Lucas are the founders of the nonprofit Friends of Fieldworkers. You can find more information about Judy, Ted, and their organization at our website, immigrationforum.org/podcast. And while you're there, subscribe to Only in America to catch all the latest episodes. Tune in next week for the second installment of Growing a Better System, where we'll hear a grower's perspective on immigration in the ag industry. Only in America is produced and edited by Joanna Taylor and Megan Wetmore. I'm Ali Nirani, and I will talk to you next week.